I've been working as a park ranger for close to 2 decades, and in that time, I've seen a lot. But nothing like what I encountered at my last station. I'll share this story because maybe someone can learn from it or at least take heed when exploring the dark corners of the wild. To protect what's left of my sanity and reputation, I can't be too specific about where this all happened. But it was somewhere remote, deep in the wilderness where thick pines cluster close together and whisper with each gust of wind. It all began just before summer. Winters were quiet here. Only the truly seasoned or those who like to think of themselves as seasoned adventurers made it out to these woods. Usually, the winter snow and solitude were our chance to close down worn-out campsites and rotate to new spots so nature could recover. But something felt different that year, though I couldn't have known how strange things would get. One cold, quiet morning, I set out to check some campsites, eager to get things back in shape for the summer crowd. The first site was as I'd expected. Nothing but a few leftover fire circles and some muddy tracks. I moved to the next one, where, on the way down a ridge toward the river, I spotted something unusual scattered on the forest floor below, torn pieces of tents and camping supplies strewn over a wide area. Unauthorized campers, I muttered to myself, cursing their mess. The people who did this kind of thing usually just left garbage, a bit of litter, sometimes a fire barely put out. I climbed down the rocky ridge, approaching the site. But the closer I got, the stronger a smell drifted toward me. It was thick, metallic, the kind of smell that doesn't leave you once you've inhaled it. That's when I noticed the stains. Pools of dark red splashed across the frozen dirt and snow-covered stones, patches thick and fresh. I froze, staring at the trail that slithered from the blood-soaked snow back into the deep brush, a trail as though something heavy had been dragged into the trees. I put a hand on my radio to call in backup, but hesitated, knowing I should get a better idea of what was going on here. I had seen a lot in my career, but my gut was telling me to leave. The sun was beginning to dip low, and I didn't want to be out there after dark. Still, curiosity overpowered me. I stepped closer, heart pounding, hand hovering over my holstered gun. The campsite was a wreck. The remains of tents were shredded, and food and belongings were scattered everywhere. No personal items, no backpacks, no sleeping bags. Just a torn plastic cooler, half-empty cans of beer, and piles of broken branches. My eyes drifted back to the pools of blood and the long, dragging path leading toward the trees. But there was something missing, no bodies, no signs of anyone who could have left this much blood behind. Then I noticed something else, total silence. It was as if every living thing around me had vanished. No birds, no wind, nothing. At that moment, I backed away and grabbed my radio, calling for backup and waiting for what felt like an eternity before the team arrived. As I watched them assess the scene, their grim faces told me they saw what I did. I was sent to report back to headquarters, and when I arrived, the whole building was in chaos. Our manager pulled me into his office immediately. He looked pale, eyes wide and darting as he listened to every word of my report, nodding, lips pressed thin, hands trembling. After a long pause, he asked me to leave. As I exited, I heard the click of a lock behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, or that he knew more than he was letting on. Over the next few days, rumors spread through the station. Then, one morning, a new manager showed up with a team of what he called security specialists. He was blunt, cold even, and made it clear that he'd been brought in to handle a crisis. He outlined his plan to me and a few of the senior rangers. The ravaged campsite and others around it would be burned in a controlled fire. I was shocked. No one burned these woods unless it was absolutely necessary, but something in his expression warned me against arguing. 2 nights later, the skies glowed red from the flames. I remember watching them from the ranger station, hoping it would be enough to put an end to whatever was lurking out there. But the manager seemed far from satisfied. He had us install high-powered floodlights all along the perimeter of the station and around the closest campsites. He issued each of us heavier firearms, the kind usually reserved for dangerous encounters. We were to carry them at all times, and under no circumstances were we to respond to any calls after dark. Report only, he told us. Let the specialists handle it. The nights became tense. Every creak and whisper of the woods outside made my skin crawl. One evening, a few campers decided to ignore the no trespassing signs and slipped into the forbidden section of the park. Their cars were still parked there at midnight, and I saw the glimmer of their campfire up the ridge. I radioed the manager, and he told me not to intervene, to let him know if anything changed. Just after midnight, the entire station was suddenly lit with beams from military-grade flashlights as a dozen men stormed in. They loaded up and marched straight into the woods toward the campers' site, their faces tight with determination. The following morning, the only thing left of the campers' fire was a smoldering black circle and ashes scattered in the snow. I should have transferred out right then. But we don't get to choose which assignments we stick with, and besides, I wanted to know what was happening in my park. Over the next few weeks, they tightened the rules. No lights allowed in the park at night. No campers permitted beyond a certain radius, and our shifts grew shorter. Our manager, normally stoic, seemed to break under the pressure. I'd catch him pacing, muttering to himself, eyes bloodshot as he watched the tree line. One night, during one of my overnight shifts, I got a call from him. He was on patrol near the new campgrounds, and his voice was shaking. "They're out there, just past the light," he whispered, before the line went dead. I could only hear faint footsteps, then muffled screams before silence took over. I called the backup number, and a cold, distant voice instructed me to stay inside, not to leave until morning. When dawn broke, I went outside to check the surroundings. There was no sign of the manager, just a strange smell hanging in the air. A few hours later, a team arrived, heavily armed, led by a commander who refused to tell me what had happened. They swept through the woods, rifles at the ready. When they returned, they carried what looked like equipment and documents from our office, shoving them into unmarked vans. The commander looked at me and nodded. "You need a new supervisor," he said flatly. "This area will be closed indefinitely." The official story was simple. They were conducting a controlled burn to make way for new growth, and the park would be closed for renovations. And I was sent halfway across the country to a new post, somewhere far away. But I still can't shake that feeling I had when I was standing in that ravaged campsite. Whatever was out there, lurking just beyond the reach of the floodlights, it's still there. I'm sure of it. Wherever you are, wherever you roam in the wild, take heed. Some things shouldn't be disturbed. And if you ever find yourself on the edge of the woods at night, in a place where the lights are so bright they blind, remember this: it's not there to help you see. It's to keep whatever lurks in the dark from crossing over.